All right, guys, welcome to your big bad Excel test review. So Excel is definitely the hardest test that we have, but it's totally doable if you kind of know what you're doing. And you can see here that we have this test review broken apart into different objectives. We have objective one, creating and managing worksheets, and then we have all the way through objective five, creating charts and objects. Oh, I dropped that in there twice. My bad. And then we actually have our test review itself right here. And if you pop this thing open, MS Excel 2016 PDF, it will look something like this. Yeah, I already have it open. And you can see this is broken apart into 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, formatting worksheets, 1-4, customizing options, 1-5. And then we have objective 2, managing data cells, 2-1, 2-2. So this is kind of chunked apart, and we're going to take this very slowly. But we have different worksheets to go with all these different objectives. So for right now, if you scroll all the way back up to the top, it says objective 1, creating worksheets and workbooks. So under your Classcraft accounts, you need to start with this one right here, objective 1, creating and managing worksheets and workbooks, and it's going to kind of look like this. So Excel, just to kind of break this down, Excel is basically an endless amount of cells. So these are all cells, and all a cell is in Microsoft Excel is an intersection of columns and rows. All right. You can make your columns and rows bigger just by clicking in between the actual column letters and dragging. You can make your rows wider just by clicking and dragging as well to widen them up. And you can kind of control what goes on in your worksheet just by hovering in between the column letters or the row numbers. All right. And if you look at task number 1 here for our first objective, it says add a worksheet to the to existing workbook. So let's go ahead and look. This whole thing is called a workbook in Excel. When you open up a workbook, by default, you get one worksheet, but you can see this workbook actually has 5 different worksheets at the very bottom. And you can add as many worksheets as you want to any one workbook. So I'm going to click New Sheet down here. You can see it's going to give me sheet 1, and I think the first thing that we actually have to do is drag it. At the bottom of the workbook, click the plus sign. Copy an existing worksheet to the end of the workbook. Right-click on the employee worksheet and click copy. So copy an existing worksheet. This is actually a really handy thing. If you need to move or copy an entire worksheet exactly the way it is and put it in a different workbook, you can. So it says copy an existing worksheet to the end of the workbook. Right-click on Employees Worksheet and click Copy. So we're going to say Employees is right here. We're going to right-click on this thing, and you're going to see something that says Move or Copy. All right, and when we click Move or Copy, you can see here that we have some options here. Where do you want to move it to? And if you look, it says Before Sheet. So if I click right here, it'll pop in. That's kind of where it is. If I click right here, product list, it'll pop in like right here in between sheet 1 and product list. They say they want us to move it to the end though, and they want us to create a copy. They don't want us to move the whole thing. They just want us to copy it. So we're going to click right here that says create a copy, move to end. All right. And when we click OK, you'll notice that it says employees and then it has a 2. All right. Because it's our second one. It says drag, move a worksheet. Drag sheet 1 to the end of the workbook. So we inserted this one earlier, sheet 1, and it says it wants us to drag it to the end of the workbook right here. So we're going to just click literally and drag it and drop it right after employees 2. All right. So you can manipulate different worksheets. You can also add colors to your worksheets to the different tabs if you want. You can rename them by right-clicking and saying rename worksheet. You can delete them. You can insert more. You can hide them. You can do whatever you want just by right-clicking on the actual tab of the worksheet itself. All right. It says it wants us to import data from a delimited text file. Click on Sheet 1 worksheet in cell A1. Click on the Data tab, and under the External Data group, select From Text. So with this question, what you're doing is you're basically taking another file that already exists, a text file, and you're putting it into an Excel spreadsheet, all right? It says browse to the 1-1 text file that you downloaded, accept all other defaults. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, you're gonna need to, and I think I called it 1-1 CSV file, not text file. But either way, it's in your Classcraft account. So what you're gonna do is once you navigate to Classcraft, you're gonna download the file that says CSV, 1-1 CSV. We're going to go to sheet 1 and we're going to click on cell A1. So this is the sheet that we inserted at the beginning of the review. We're going to click on cell A1, and under the data tab, you're going to see that we have this group right here called get external data. All right. So you can get external data from web, you can get it from other sources, you can get it from Access, or you can get it from text. We're going to say from text. I already downloaded this, and I think it's on my desktop right now. Yours is going to be in your Classcraft account, and it says 1-1 CSV. I'm going to go ahead and say import. You're going to get some options here, and you want to say delimited. When you click on next, this is going to give you a preview of how it's actually going to look when you put it into your actual spreadsheet. All right. And it looks like, if you notice, this spreadsheet, if you look at the actual contents, it actually is broken apart by commas, not by tabs. So I want my delimiters to be set to commas. And all that does is it says wherever there is a comma in the spreadsheet, it's going to separate that and put it into its own cell. So now look at your data preview, and this looks a little bit better. So I don't really even know what this file is. I just kind of downloaded a sample file. So let's kind of see what happens. We're going to hit next, and then we're going to hit finish. And we're going to say OK. It just says it's going to put it in cell A1. All right. Don't worry about the dollar signs right now. We'll go over that in a different lesson. So press OK. And this is our delimited text file right here. Okay. And you can see it just inserts text and separates it by whatever you want it to, really. You need to look at your file and see how it's already separated. I know it's kind of confusing. But on your actual test, when you see a question like this, when you say click on the data tab and you say get external data, that test question itself will be pretty specific. It will tell you what it wants you to separate your delimited file by, whether it's tabs or commas or whatever. So make sure you read that whole question. And it says accept all other defaults. So we're done now with 1.1, creating worksheets and workbooks. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go through 1-2, navigate in worksheets and workbooks. All right. And that's going to be a whole separate video. This is a nice short one at 7 minutes, and I'm going to cut it right here. And then next time we get together, we're going to go through 1-2 and then 1-3. Eventually, we'll work our way down through all of these different objectives with Microsoft Excel. All right. So let's kind of review real quick. In Excel, we have this entire thing is called a workbook. All of your Excel in general is just a bunch of cells, and the good definition for cells is that it's an intersection of columns and rows. You can adjust the column width of cells just by clicking and dragging in between the column letters. You can adjust the row height just by clicking and dragging between the row numbers. All right. If you're pulling in data from another source, there's a whole section here under the data tab where you can pull it in from various sources. All right. And then make sure you guys know that these worksheets at the very bottom, you can add as many worksheets as you want to any one existing workbook. All right. You can rename them just by right clicking on them. You can move them or copy them if you want to different parts of your worksheet or to a completely different worksheet. So there's a little bit about Excel. If you haven't used Excel, that's just enough to get your feet wet. And one more thing before we leave, if you kind of look at my cursors in Excel, this is pretty important. The cursors, there's 3 different cursors in Excel. The white cursor here that I have right now that you see is actually your selection cursor. So if you click and drag with the white cross, all it does is select a group of cells. If I were to hover over the edge, once I actually select a cell, notice how my cursor is now turned to a 4-pronged arrow. That means I can now click and drag and move the contents of that cell to another cell. All right. And then check this out. I have one more cursor. If I hover over the corner of any cell, I get this little thin black cross. This is called my fill handle, and I can use this to copy cells from one cell to another. You can literally pull it any direction you want. and it'll copy any direction you want. There's also a really cool thing you can do with your fill handle to where you can fill series. So if I type in the number 1 and pull it down, notice how it copied the number 1, but if I actually right click and say fill series, it will actually number it for me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this works with dates as well. So there's a little trick for Excel.